You guys have done a lot of transactions around the United States. Stuff in Florida, do you have projects going on? Tell us about the environment, and I'm curious if you've got anything in Cape Coral or nearby.
We don't have anything right now in Florida. We've been in Florida in the past. Something that Florida has to struggle with is rising insurance costs, and that has made it really hard for property owners and for new investors to come into that market because of insurance.
Is that why you guys are staying out?
Well, we've been staying out of coastal for a little while. We started looking back at it again because insurance started to level out, but insurance rates are incredibly high.
That's not just a Florida story. It's a California story, too.
It's all coastal right now, and fires, right?
Yeah.
We get that in California.
And we see that start to hit parts of California, like Malibu and the Malibu area. But for the most part, California real estate prices are still really, really high, even though it's challenging and expensive to insure those properties. When does that chicken come to roost?
California real estate market has always been very unique in the sense that it's an appreciation market and not a cash flow market. So it's always been a little bit tight there. But when does that stop? I don't. It's a market that seems to not follow economics.
And you don't have anything in California right now,
We
right?
used to. We started in California. That's where we were for 10 years, and we do not now. So we are very cash flow oriented.
So talk to us about the environment, what you are seeing today versus what it was 6 months ago, 12 months ago. I think it's been a few months since we last talked.
Yeah, absolutely. We're still seeing a very bifurcated economy, both in the macro economy and then also within submarkets. So what we're seeing is a bit of mean reversion right now, where markets had overgrowth are starting to cool down a little bit and starting to try to absorb all that overgrowth. And some of the markets that were more depressed, that didn't overbuild, are starting to rise. You see something like that in like Chicago or San Francisco, where now all of a sudden you see 3-4% annual increases, which is really high compared to some of the rents in the country that are starting to drop. So we are seeing a tale of two cities.
Since we last spoke to you, the Trump administration has come out with some different, I wouldn't call them policies, I'd say policy proposals to try to get housing within control for many Americans.
Sure.
Some of them target single family homes and institutional investors. Is anything that you've heard from Washington, D.C. helping to alleviate the problem?
You know, we're hearing a little bit about it in that single family buy to rent or rent to own model. And we're not seeing it we don't hear proposals coming out as how are you going to help workforce housing or market rate housing, right? So there are ways to help as far as subsidized housing like Section 8 or something like that. But ultimately what it comes down to is cost of living is rising so much, and it's more so than the cost of actual housing. That workforce housing or free market housing stays pretty stable. It grows slowly, but it stays a little bit independent from macroeconomics because you get a lot of friction in mobility. People aren't moving a lot out of their units, but then again, you know, we talk about this lack of affordable housing.
Right.
We have to dig into what is that? What does that mean?
Well, we constantly, I think, pepper people with questions to try to understand. And before we got going, we said, well, you know, one of the things that we've kind of pushed on is building housing, affordable housing where the jobs are, whether it's a major city, rather than having someone who's got to, you know, take a train or a bus or however, 2 hours or an hour and a half or something, you know, outside that major city in order to live, you know, affordably.
Sure. I mean, you see something like New York right now, and you've got units here that are vacant, but it's hard for landlords to bring them back online. How do they do that, especially when you've got threats of a rent freeze here in New York? How do you offset that for the landlord?
So it's cheaper for them to leave them open than to rent them at a below market rate.
That's true in some of the places in New York. New York is very specific.
Okay. But not in other cities?
In other cities, you're not seeing that as much, but you don't have those freezes like that. Even in places where you do have rent control, we are seeing some relief on other sides. I think that we do see that cities are starting to recognize that keeping landlords from raising their rents ends up hurting affordability overall.
Where are you bullish right now? Where do you want to do new projects?
We're really bullish in the Midwest right now. We like areas that are very stable. We don't like to see that overgrowth. We like to see places that are that have a lot of economic growth as far as workforce.
So where in the Midwest?
We love Ohio right now. We're buying a lot there. It's a great time to invest right now if you're very discerning and specific with what you buy. So we're looking for upside down capital stacks.
So Southern Ohio, Central Ohio, Northern Ohio. I mean, these are all very different parts.
Sure. Right now we're heavy in Columbus. We're looking in Cleveland. We're looking in Cincinnati.
Okay, so that's everywhere. It's pretty much.
It's a little bit. We're all over the Midwest. We like other cities too. It really depends. We're more deal oriented. We're looking for where is that upside down capital stack that really needs us to come in to infuse capital, because that's what really happens.
So much money has gone down south, certainly the Southeast. Is that gotten overheated at this point? I've heard some signs or some stories about things like prices starting to come down, at least in kind of residential homes. But what are you seeing there?
Right. So that's that Sun Belt area, or some of those overheated areas that are now coming back down. So I think that what happened is there was this oversupply of building, right? We hit this peak of building in like 2022. Those units started coming online. If you take a look at where we're at today, new development is 70% in 2025 below where it was at its peak in 2022. So now we're seeing that absorption. And so that drops prices for a little bit, but they'll even out and start to come back.
So Amy, in terms of affordability, bottom line, in your view, it's more about like thinking about why is it that people can't afford to buy homes? And is it wages, or like, is that what we need to be focusing on in your view from what you see?
Right. So in what I deal with, we are not really competing against the home market. We are providing housing for renters by necessity as opposed to lifestyle renters or people who choose. But what we're seeing is really it's cost of living is high and cost of mobility is high. And so that just getting out and packing up and moving and getting a new security deposit down somewhere, and that the costs of that is what is expensive. So we're seeing a lot more concessions on the front end as opposed to rent reductions.
All right.